interesting, that creative part, which is, like you said, when you were traveling Berlin, London, wherever, I think all those things have their own materialization also in the work at the end.
Yeah, you're right, because like, you know, I think the first thing was really interviews and this kind of material, trying to think about how to materialize it. Because it feels really invisible. Not just, like their stories are invisible, but my labor was invisible. And I think this is why also I'm in the work through that second screen, where you see me making the set.
Yeah.
And that felt really like, only at the end it made sense that I should be fully double screen. You know, I thought I'm just going to have a moment of showing my work and my labor. But my very wise friend who wrote a really good text, Branislava, said, just record yourself all the way through and then you can decide. Which was really good. Because then I was like, oh yeah, it makes sense, you know. But I think it's that invisibility also of labor, of like research, you know, a lot of research, a lot of what we do is so invisible.
Totally invisible work, is that? You're paid for a product.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what I wanted to say about the art world, or not quite, maybe the art world, but like the context in which I produce as an artist, or we all produce, it's very driven through, like all of the stuff, through, I guess, production. So it's like, in a way, the reason also for my kind of insecurity in that period was that I actually wasn't producing anything. And if you don't produce,
you're dead.
yeah. So but I kind of didn't really realize for quite a while that the anxiety wasn't just the kind of anxiety of not knowing where you're going with your project, you know, which is quite normal because you're kind of meandering and you're sort of working things out, which can be actually incredibly liberating process and exciting.
Yeah.
But there was something, I guess I was also shifting things in my own practice a bit, questioning a lot of things. But I think as well, a big part is also that kind of sense of production, because you know, if you're doing things that are a bit more long term, as an artist, you're not really producing work. So you're not like, I didn't produce that, and that was my work. You know what I mean? These are not series of objects, all like a one piece, and so. So
one
that
big
felt,
reflection.
Yeah.
About the themes that you choose. Like here, it is a problem of feminism. It is a problem of labor. It is a problem of space. Also, it's a problem of history.
Yes.
So it's also you have a feeling that here in the space.
That's great. Yeah, and there's some very interesting reading on gender as well, and in terms of Monica Matos, she's a historian, but also she writes a lot on gender and history, and she wrote really interesting stuff about. I mean, she's the one that told me it was mostly women working in factories. Which I didn't know, and it kind of spurred me on to the whole project. I didn't quite set out to do that in the beginning, and it kind of just like, wow, it's really interesting. And she's been writing about the kind of gender politics of the 60s that had an effect on bringing in the women, the migrant women, to do the work because they wanted to keep German women at home.
Yes.
You know, so it's kind of like, you know, how it all, I found that sort of connections. You know, and in a way, this is kind of also why perhaps installation is interesting, because you can create connections and you go like, okay, that connects to that, and then the connections in Yugoslavia at the time, the situation, which is a little bit reflected in that video.
Yes.
And but how to open it up so that these connections and people are free to make. I guess that's sort of also a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
For me, that was also like issue of authority, like an archive, because archives have a they're kind of like almost, it's like a place where you produce authority. So you go to an archive and it's got authority because it's an archive. It's serious and
it's an institution.
It's an institution. yeah. And so, in a way, I mean, I'm hesitant to call this an archive because I think it's not an institution. I mean, it's not an institutional archive. It's a collection of things. Perhaps it's better because archive gives a sense of authority, and
criterion.
Yeah, and this is kind of like,
Criterions
well,
are always questionable because it's made in the dominant ideology,
Yeah.
mostly.
yeah,
But isn't that a good reason to call it archive? To question exactly this, what is usually understood under archive?
it's a very good question. Yeah, a very good point. I guess yes. Yeah, I mean, for me, it was just like I didn't want to like replicate that kind of authoritative. That was all. It was like hesitation, like, oh my God, you know, people come in and I replicate that authority. And I think that was something that I feel like this is kind of more like experiments in thinking through the what would be an archive and what would be a collection. But inevitably, you do create authority. I mean, just by having an exhibition. And people come into galleries already also with a certain... So you're already in a charged space. It's a space of history and its own kind of message into which the work goes in. So it's a... Yeah. So I think you're totally right. It's how to actually challenge that. And in a way...
And it is necessary to challenge. Because also if we leave things as they are also so much powerful than we are, and we will always stay marginal. And dominant will reproduce itself all the time, and that's why it's also, I think, it's not the strategy, it's not to, okay, we will do something else, we don't care for them. No, you cannot ignore them. They are putting our world. They are telling us how we will live. And that's why I think it's very important to choose them on their own definitions.
Yes, and I think this is where I feel, I mean, for me, in terms of operating a gallery space, I think this is where I feel it's really, it's a great kind of opportunity to question the language in which these narratives are created. So like here, I mean, you could do it in lots of spaces, I guess. Public spaces need to do that. But I mean, here I'm thinking, gosh, you know, this is where we can really question how language is constructed, how ideology is constructed, and how these stories are constructed. So
and how our lives and roles are constructed.
Yeah. So
because it's not something what is inside, outside of us.
No.
It's something what is deeply inside of us.
Totally.
In the most intimate wish. So,
that's the hardest bit, isn't it? Always to look so like, and not to reproduce these separations of outside and inside. I think that's really important.
Yes.
So we don't delude ourselves.
Yeah, I told one girl now on radio, we were making for 8 March one emission, and I told her it's for high school pupils, and I told her that for a feminism, for that position of not being and trying to survive as a feminism, you have to have courage. And I think that goes also together with that what you told. You don't get paid in one time. You want to work, invisible work, everything. It's coming, and that's why you see that it's not all our intimate is also on one way to also political.
Absolutely, I mean, absolutely, totally. I'm also thinking like there's a moment when I was interviewing the women, and I was in a way putting them a bit in a position of like, okay, their history is being marginalized, which it is. But there was a moment in which I realized that actually, you know, I'm a precarious worker, and you know, they've actually had, I mean, now the situation, for some of them the situation is, some of the situation now is okay, you know, they got a pension and they're sort of sorted with immigration status and stuff. I mean, my situation is okay, I'm sorted with immigration status, but I realized that actually the kind of precarity in which I'm actually producing the project within has to also reflect, otherwise they are kind of the fetishized object or subject of my work, and I'm not reflected in that. But it's about how to include, again, the politics of like how to include yourself in your own voice, so that it's actually, so in a way that it's commenting on the reality of the situation and not just kind of romanticizing either their situation and ignoring my own. So there was a moment in the video that I've chosen, even though it was the hardest bit to do, the interview, and in that interview you hear my voice. So like here,
so you actually got a question.
There's a kind of bit where we're basically I'm interviewing her, so I'm reenacting myself. So I had to learn what I said in that moment, because I tried to do it spontaneous, but it didn't work. So I had to learn my lines. So it was like I'm acting myself. It was just bizarre.
But it's nice because you have many interviews, and it's just this one, right? Where you are returning the answer. And because we are always looking at it, it looks like it is reflecting to the viewer. It looks like we are again, we are asked to reply as well. So
great.
this part I really liked.
That was the hardest bit for me, and the one that I can't judge. So it's really good to hear your reflection. Really useful, because I just cringe at that point still. But I had to do it. It's almost like you said, like the work sort of takes you over and it demands, and like the work was demanding. You got to be
leading you.
And it was important because, she has a response of like, oh, so you went to see your parents. There was in a way, actually, she didn't have an understanding of a kind of the other, the other migration flow. So I wanted to break that kind of moment of like, who's the subject here, and more out of kind of wanting to kind of reflect that, but also the interesting that's kind of the viewers then being kind of put in that position. And so so like the three parts are all different, and the one that's Jana, she's the interview part.
It was great chat.